I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good morning, Bowling Green. Good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name, I am he who shall not be named, except now it's time to name me, Joseph R. DeMare, and I am your host.
We had our suspicions all along.
Yes, it wasn't too hard to figure out who I was, lurking in the background for the last 10 months. Wow, it's very difficult to keep myself away from this microphone. But I'm here with my fabulous co-host.
We had to use the spray bottle. Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I, for the next hour, are going to bring you an incredible hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your co-workers, Democrats and Republicans and Libertarians and Communists and Socialists and Whigs and Christian Democrats and Sinn Féin members, and basically...
Do we have a large following of Whigs? I was not aware of that.
Well, the Whigs haven't been too active for, 100 years or so, but, who knows? These days they may just make a big resurgence. Oh, and the Know Nothing Party, don't forget about them.
Right.
And basically everybody of every political suasion and people who aren't political and all those other living things on this planet that don't get a say in any of our political goings-on, but are affected by them nonetheless. Because all of us are wrapped up here on this wonderful planet called Earth. And those of you who live on Earth know that there's some challenges here on the planet.
Okay, wait. Do we have some listeners that we know of who do not live on Earth?
Well, you never know.
So it's possible,
These radio signals they start at the top of the radio tower and they go out and out and over and down. And so we could have some non-Earth dwelling listeners. Maybe even the people on the ISS tuned into this.
Land at your own risk.
Right. Now you've been warned. So the reason I have not been able to be named on this show for the last 10 months or participate in it as a host is because I have been running for mayor of Bowling Green for the last 10 months. Cubulus's interpretation of the equal time law means that I was not allowed to be mentioned on the show. I couldn't be on the show.
But they'd have to give that other dude in a full hour every week, I suppose.
That was their excuse, their interpretation. Now, that was the belief of the lawyers at Cumulus, and now the belief of the lawyers at the other stations we air on. They said that all the law says is that you have to give an equal opportunity. So all they would have had to do is allow my opponent to also buy an hour of time once a week, and they would have been covered. But they didn't even want to go down that route. So
yeah, that's a lot of politics for a sports station probably per week. I don't know.
Could be that was what their reasoning was, or could be they just didn't like having me on the air. I don't know. But anyway, I'm back, baby, and very, very happy to be here with all you folks once again. And so for the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about various observations I've had, ecologically speaking. And this is a pre-recorded show, again, so you're not going to be able to call in. But you can call in with your welcome back messages or your Can you just leave again and bring Joey, Joseph T. DeMare back on? He was great. Loved the beard. You can bring any kind of notes or anything like that. You can email us at foragreedfutureradio@gmail.com, or you can send a text or even call at 419-973-5841. We are recording this on November 9th, about 2:30 p.m., and so anything that happens after this between now and Saturday, you're on your own. We won't be able to cover that till next week. But we do love hearing from you, and we do love doing this show. And so, as I said, we're going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so about various things. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons, whom we also love dearly. And then it'll be Rebecca. Rebecca, what do you have for us this week?
For in honor of Veterans Day, I'm going to be doing a slightly less shallow dive on Farley Mowat.
Oh, Farley Mowat.
Canadian writer and naturalist.
Yes, he's come up a couple times in the last few weeks.
I'm slightly obsessed, but yeah, now I'm going to try and explain why.
Yeah, okay. Oh, and this week's interview, I forgot to mention this because I'm out of practice here. I haven't done this in 10 months. This week's interview is going to be with a gentleman named Dr. William Hintz, and Hintz, and he's with the Lake Erie Center. We're going to dive even deeper on plankton again. two plankton shows in a row. I don't know if we could.
I thought they mostly floated to the surface and you didn't have to dive that deeply, but whatever.
Oh, no.
Are they down?
They
down the vents and
travel.
stuff
This
too?
is one of the things he talks about. They go up and down in the water column every day. So they make a huge journey from the deep water to the shallow and back to so. Anyway, he's going to be talking to us about phytoplankton in Lake Erie and the problem of salinization that we talked about last week. We did a news story on that, and he's going to give us a little more in-depth look at that. Then, so it's us talking, then the interview with William Hintz, then advertisers and patrons, then Rebecca, and then we're going to our ecological news segment, and we've got some good news down from Puerto Rico way, very encouraging, and some bad news from our court system, basically overturning stuff that was protecting people. And we also have some sort of Midland news from the MI from Michigan, which is kind of half good, half bad. But we'll get to that. So that's after the bottom of the hour. So here I am back again. It's been quite an adventure. We over the past 10 months, we've been campaigning like crazy. I was running as an independent because the state of Ohio has stripped the Green Party of its party status. They went and changed the rules, so it's basically impossible.
Which is specifically why I won't vote in any Democratic primaries, because if I do, I'll be back to being a registered. I got into being a registered Green during the 2 years or whatever it was that we were official party on the ballot.
Yeah,
and I forfeit that if I vote in their primaries.
Yeah, we had 4 years of being a real honest to goodness party. And every one of those years during the primary season, our membership doubled.
Yeah.
And so we were up to over 8,000 members. So it was kind of ironic that the year that they wiped our party out, we had more members than we'd ever had before. We had more candidates on the ballot than we'd ever had in history. And basically we were doing great. But once they took away our party line, it's very hard to recruit candidates when you don't have a party line to offer them.
Yeah.
Then they're just like, well, why don't I just run as an independent? Because, and so the party has declined quite a bit in most of the states since then. But in Wood County, actually, the Wood County Green Party is still doing very well. And we mounted a really good campaign. Because the issues are, directly related to the environment. The issues that we were running on. Bowling Green, we've mentioned it before, has a penalty on having rooftop solar. They have a $4 per installed kilowatt per month penalty for having solar panels. And that penalty wipes out any benefit of having solar. So that's why there's only 10 houses in an entire city of 30,000 people with solar, because every time anybody thinks about getting it and they run the numbers, they say, wait, with that penalties, makes no sense at all. So it's been very effective at preventing people from putting solar on their roof. And that was one of my main campaign issues. And one of the other main campaign issues was that the current mayor is planning to, and you know what, he shall name this, right?
Right.
This is my show. I don't have to name that guy. But he is planning to tear down Bowling Green's iconic wind turbines next year. Instead of like refurbishing them, because you could go to Vestas and they actually will sell you an entire refurbished turbine of that model. So we could literally just pull out the broken ones. 2 of the 4 are broken right now. But they're going to tear all 4 of them down. So
for those of you from out of state, no, we are not all churchy religious cultists, maggots here. But yes, Bowling Green is kind of the Ohio your parents warned you about.
Well, we're quite in the lead with these turbines when we installed them 20 years ago. It was the first wind farm, east of the Mississippi, utility scale wind farm east of the Mississippi. And it made headlines. It put Bowling Green on the map. We had a tourism industry because it was 20 years ago, these massive utility scale turbines were so rare that it was, people just wanted to come see them. And then we've got a nice little display over there with a plaque explaining everything, but all that's going to be torn down. So we were quite progressive at one time, but now Bowling Green gets 60% of its electricity from a coal plant in Illinois called Prairie State. And so
people don't understand, I think, in the rest of the country, how much energy and how much money goes into repressing any kind of progressive movements in the Midwest. Like, it's not that we don't have the impulse towards progressivism, it's more that it gets quashed quite energetically.
Yeah, there are a lot of people spend a lot of time not, convincing each other not to vote for me. It was so as I said, the final count was I got 26% and my opponent got 74%. People have told me I should actually be very happy with that because Green Party, in the Midwest, in the middle, plunk in the middle of conservative Wood County there, I should be happy. I've got such more than a quarter of the votes.
Yeah.
But the problem is,
you actually want to win is the problem.
Yeah.
You want to accomplish, to implement those policies and stuff.
Yeah. And I really needed to win because what we've been seeing since July, every month, including October, July 2023, August, September, October 2023, have all been the hottest on record. So it was the hottest July ever, the hottest August ever, the hottest September ever. And September is when it really just jumped. The graph went shoo, like that up to the ceiling, and October was just as bad. And so we have to stop putting carbon in the air. So basically choosing a candidate who's committed to getting another 45 years of 60% of Bowling Green's electricity from the coal plant way over there in Illinois. That plant puts 1 billion tons of CO2 into the air every 2 weeks. And so it needs to shut down. It needs to die. But basically that wasn't important enough for the people of Bowling Green to choose a new mayor. Thousands of people voted for me. I'm extremely grateful for that 26%. Really have to hand it to them in terms of bravery and bucking the two-party system and so I am encouraged that there's thousands of people who feel that strongly enough about that and understand the threat is large enough that should be like the main focus of all our policies is shutting down the carbon getting, over to clean energy. But I'm terribly disappointed that it wasn't enough. In this situation, 26% is not good enough. I mean, if we had another decade, if this were 2013 or 2003, and I got 26%, I would be, cheering. I'd be like, yeah, we're building, we're getting there. We don't have time to build this slowly. I mean, this was the best performance the Greens have had in Wood County, so we are building, but we don't have another decade. We can't take another 10 years to get to the point of actually shutting these coal plants down and switching over to clean energy, wind and solar. So that's what I've been doing. I've been knocking on doors. I've been running ads in all the local media. I've gone to candidate events. I love campaigning because I find door-to-door campaigning is like the best antidote for cynicism there is. Because, when you get your impression from other people from the media, you get the idea that these people are like mean, terribly mean, and they're unreasoning. And when I go door to door and actually knock on the door and actually talk to people, the vast majority, 900 plus out of 1,000 people are extremely reasonable and nice, and you can have a conversation with them. And I just find it really uplifting to go door to door like that. But and what happened when I went door to door and told people about our solar penalty, they were shocked and horrified, and they were like, that's crazy, we should not have that.
And that is probably why your opponent does not want an hour a week to express his views. He mostly probably does not want people to know about them. That's one gets the impression a key strategy of his, either represent or misrepresent or conceal them.
That is a point. I mean, that is entirely possible, because it is a policy that the more people hear about it, the less they like it, and the more likely they are to take an action to get rid of it. And that's what the whole political thing is moving from the ideas to the action. At least that's what I look at politics as.
Right.
Some people look at politics as a way to just maintain this power status quo, to keep these rich people rich, and keep these political people who have all the power in power, and keep everybody else just kind of out of the whole thing, because, these people over here think they know best for everybody, and they just want to keep running things. And
well, we have you back, silver lining, and also, a lot more people probably know about that law than did before.
That is true. And
that's something. The
current city government, the current mayor, the current municipal utility board, they ignore that at their peril, because like I said, 90+% of the people were like, that's crazy, we should not be doing that.
Yeah.
So that was reassuring, that, even if people couldn't bring themselves to vote for me, they agreed with me on the issues. So.
In the very least, come on, big government. You should have the right to use whatever kind of heat and energy system you want in your own home without the government telling you can't, effectively.
Right. I was wondering where the conservatives were on
exactly,
that.
Yeah.
Banning solar is essentially a taking, because you have this resource, this rooftop that absorbs solar energy, and they've said you cannot tap that resource. You can't make any money off it. You can't use it to power or heat or cool your home, without paying this penalty.
So effectively, the sun and the wind now belong to the coal plants. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So. Well, anyway, that was my rant. That was the explanation for my long absence, and I'm just very glad to be back with all of you, and happy to get on with the show. I was reading the Washington Post, and there was an article in there about the salinization of the country. Basically, we're putting so much road salt and other sources of salt onto the roads that our freshwater streams and lakes are turning into salt.
Oh, Lord.
And so we covered the story last week, but one of the
Now we can have sharks living in them.
Eventually,
Basically.
if we keep doing this. So one of the people who was quoted as commenting on this study was from the University of Toledo. And I was like, wow, we've got an expert right here in Northwest Ohio. I got to get his opinion on it. So I asked him for an interview, and he graciously accepted. And so let's hear from Dr. William Hintz. Hello, and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Yeah, my name is Bill Hintz. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toledo. I work out at the University of Toledo's Lake Erie Center.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Lake Erie Center? What do you folks do there? I see that's where you physically are right now.
Yes, sir. So we do a lot of research on freshwater ecosystems. So, freshwater is pretty much the most important resource, on the planet. And so you can't go a few days without drinking fresh water. And I think here in Northwestern Ohio, we're very familiar with some water quality issues. You think about harmful algal blooms, invasive species, other types of pollution. And so at the Lake Erie Center, we focus on studying, freshwater ecosystems, how they work, and the changes that are occurring as a result of human activities and things like that. So we have a lot of different research labs that focus on water quality, for example, or drinking water quality. We have other labs that focus on understanding, invasive species in Lake Erie and beyond. And then, what my research lab does is we focus on things like fish ecology and conservation. For example, we're working on reintroducing the lake sturgeon into the Maumee River with our federal and state partners. And so, as another aspect of my lab is studying salt pollution in the environment and how that can affect, freshwater communities and drinking water supplies and things like that. So we do a host of different types of research projects that are essentially for the betterment of the human condition, I would say.
Speaking of salt, the reason we asked you on this week was because you were quoted in a Washington Post article that we reported on last week, talking about the increasing salinization of both freshwater ecosystems and basically just the world in general. Could you give us a quick recap?
You bet. So if you think about natural cycles, just of different things on planet Earth, right? The salt cycle is something that not many of us really think about, but it occurs. We think about just the chemical weathering of rocks, the transport of things in our streams and our rivers, the accumulation of salts in our lakes, and then there's some salt even in the air, right? We can get sea spray, and seawater moves inland a little bit, and so these are all natural processes that occur on the planet. And so because of a lot of our activities, we have activities like, mining, road salting, agricultural practices, and things like that. We've modified the Earth's natural salt cycle. And so the authors really of the study do a great job of describing what they have now called the anthropogenic salt cycle, which is really the result of a larger syndrome, right? Freshwater salinization syndrome. And so we've modified this cycle, to an extent that is affecting organisms in freshwater ecosystems. It's affecting their growth, their reproduction, their behavior, and their survival. And it also has implications for, our drinking water quality as well. And so modifying the natural salt cycle in the way we have, is going to have real implications for, human health and activities and the things we enjoy from the environment.
And specifically, one of the things that are groups of living things that get affected by this salinization is plankton, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you do a fair bit of study of plankton. What drew you to plankton? And this is a question we ask all our plankton researchers. What is your favorite type of plankton and why?
Yeah. So, So by training, I'm a fisheries biologist. I've studied, fish and fisheries for a long time, and almost every fish at the beginning of its life consumes zooplankton, right? Fish survive and grow and become the fish we like to fish for, the fish we like to eat, because at some stage in their life or their entire life, they consume zooplankton. So, zooplankton, people don't often pay attention to them. They're small, little critters in the water column, but they are critically important to our wetlands and our lake ecosystems. So those plankton, the importance of them is they eat essentially all the green stuff and each other in the water, right? And so by consuming, algae and maybe other plankton for the predatory types of zooplankton, they increase their biomass, which provides food for fish. So like you and I, we often eat foods that, those food items, let's just say a steak, for example, cows are dependent on grass, for example, or other kinds of food or plants, right? And so zooplankton kind of transform all this energy built up in what we would call the green food web, right? And they put it into their own biomass, and that can then be transferred to all the small fish, then the big fish, and then even the bigger fish that we as humans enjoy. So they're a critical link in the food chain or in the food web. And without the zooplankton, there wouldn't be any, there couldn't be any fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really they are that important link. And because of their size and because of their their physiology, so on and so forth, they're also good indicators of what's happening in the environment. So in my lab, we study kind of what a lot of different research labs study, and that's Daphnia, right? Water fleas. And so, I mean, they're adorable, right, too. But we can understand when we use Daphnia as a model system or zooplankton as a model system, it helps us get a rapid assessment of what's happening in the environment. So any pollutant like salt, we can understand how changes in reproduction or survival are going to occur in this critically important link in the food chain.
So I guess that you're saying Daphnia is your favorite plankton then.
It's so hard to choose, but yes.
Okay, cool.
For so many reasons, it's not only a great scientific model, but you can see their heartbeat, you can see them feeding, you can see them digesting, and they have cool behaviors in response to environmental stimuli, in response to fish predators, and so they exhibit a lot of really cool behaviors that we can document to scientists, and their physiology is fascinating as well. So
now your specific research in this area, you have actually found that salinization affects plankton and how they behave. Could you review a little bit of that for us?
Yeah. So these plankton, let's just say in Lake Erie, for example, all these zooplankton, they move up and down the water column pretty much every day. We call this diel-vertical migration. And so basically what the plankton are responding to is light levels. So during the day, light is really intense in the surface waters. They're responding to predators, visual predators. We can think about like certain minnow species, in Lake Erie, all kinds of shiners and things like that. So they're responding to different stimuli, and they move up and down the water column, feeding on algae at different times of the day. And so you can observe this. It's an incredible movement of biomass, right? And so what we found is that freshwater salinization could increase the costs of moving up and down, this natural behavior that occurs every day. And so what we find is that, that additional cost could reduce their abundance, survival can be reduced, and then their growth can be reduced. Therefore, their reproductive output is reduced. And so, they're contending with what they've known for thousands of years or tens of thousands of years as fresh water. And now if it gets too salty, that can kind of affect that behavior, make it more costly. It'd be like you constantly walking, let's just say not on land, but in a swimming pool, right? If you were walking in a swimming pool, that can kind of exhaust you pretty quickly, right?
Mhm.
And so, in addition to that, we found that, at low salt concentrations, Daphnia can exhibit what we would call ecological trade-offs to deal with salt, but only to a certain extent. And so, we don't envision many evolutionary, what we would call rescue effects, where these organisms adapt to a point that they'll be resistant or resilient to salt pollution.
And since these are really the kind of the base of the food chain, fewer Daphnia, that effect gets magnified up the food chain, right? Fewer Daphnia mean a
Yeah.
lot fewer sturgeon or rainbow trout or whatever you put up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could up and down, right? And so, I think so when we lose biomass of Daphnia, and this hasn't really occurred yet in Lake Erie, right? I mean, there's some systems that are highly contaminated, others that are going up but still low. But we need to consider these things in every system where salt pollution occurs. So when these Daphnia disappear or their biomass is reduced substantially, they stop feeding on algae. Well, when they stop grazing on algae, we can see this concomitant increase in algae, right? From reduced foraging. We call that a cascading effect or top-down effect. And so in reverse, if you go up the food chain, smaller fish, young fish, newly hatched fish, of any species may not have the same food resources in terms of zooplankton availability in the environment under certain salt concentrations and types. So it's definitely an issue we should, be paying attention to when we think of, ecosystems are so diverse, right? Ecosystems are so, complicated, honest. They're that complexity of their ecology leads us to wonder, what are all the unintended effects of salt, right? How far will it cascade, or how far will it go? So and then if you have more algae, right, that can reduce light attenuation in the water, the ability of light to penetrate the water column to the bottom of a wetland or the bottom of a lake, which can be important. And, a lot of our Great Lakes are incredibly clear, right, in some places. So something to think about.
Is road salt the main source of salt contamination?
Yeah, in cold regions worldwide, road salt, where it's applied, is probably the major contributor to freshwater salinization. So, broadly defining freshwater salinization, is go home, take some of your table salt, dump it in your cup of water, right? I mean, that's what we're doing on a massive scale. And so, freshwater organisms, they can only tolerate certain levels of salt. And so, road salts are applied, in vast amounts on our roadways during the wintertime. And, those high concentrations that we see, they don't go away in the summertime. People think that road salting and road salt pollution, as we call it, goes away in the spring after winter's done. But those concentrations can often be just as high during the summer months in many locations. And so it's a year-round problem. It doesn't go away just because we stop salting. Salt from the groundwater, salt from soils, it gets exported during the summer, during rain events, and continues to pollute surface waters, our streams, our wetlands, and our lakes. So
now some municipalities are looking at things like beet juice or sand in place of salt. Mm-hmm. Could that help reduce the problem?
The science suggests no. Sand is a viable option maybe in less populated areas. And remember, I think we know of nutrient pollution pretty well in northwestern Ohio, or our nutrient problem, right? So sand can contain some nutrients. And so, sand can contain nutrients that supplement freshwater ecosystems with more nutrients. We don't quite know, if you keep applying massive amounts of sand on our roads, where's that sand going to go? well, it's going to wash into our ditches, it's going to wash into our streams, our wetlands. And so that sand could cause deposition of stream habitats, for example. All the little critters in streams on the bottom, they need certain habitat types. And so if sand is continually washing in, those could kind of cover some of the essential habitats in streams and wetlands. So sand is, in some states, I think like Montana, for example, the human population isn't as dense. So in areas that are not dense, and remember, sand doesn't provide a de-icing effect, it provides, more traction for your tires. So it really is going to depend on what's going on with the weather. Beet juice is a clever alternative and additive. The science indicates that beet juice, for instance, contains high levels of potassium. And that high level of potassium can actually be toxic to mussel glucidia. So kind of the intermediate stages of freshwater mussels, that potassium can be fairly toxic to them. So freshwater mussels worldwide are one of the most imperiled groups of organisms in our rivers and streams, right? And so, when we think about freshwater mussels, too much of that potassium from that beet juice additive, so to speak, could be affecting, their persistence and health in the environment. So while it's difficult for science to keep up with, new product development, we really need it to catch up. And there's no smoking gun, so to speak, in terms of that's going to be, the best de-icer. Because a lot of them are, they're kind of touted as ecologically friendly, but when we do the science, when we do the experimentation, we find that they are have just as much of an impact or greater than standard sodium chloride rock salt.
So what sort of research are you doing right now?
Yeah, so we're working on trying to understand how species in northwestern Ohio and Lake Erie and the Great Lakes more generally are going to respond to different concentrations and different salt types, right? So we're constantly working on, the paper that you mentioned early on in the interview, for example. There's all kinds of salt types in the environment. So how do those mixtures of salts and the salts individually affect a lot of different organisms in the environment, from fish to plankton, right? Or even algae. Started a collaboration with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, Partners for Clean Streams here in Toledo, and the Toledo Metropolitan Council of Governments, right? TMCOG. And so in conjunction with all these groups funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, we are trying to understand what's the magnitude and extent of salt pollution here in northwestern Ohio, right? And Lake Erie. And then, our laboratory work is saying, well, all the critters in those ecosystems and all the streams and wetlands and Lake Erie, salt concentrations, we're documenting those now, right? And so we want to know at those concentrations, how are the organisms going to respond?
So if people wanted to know more about the Lake Erie Center, how would they find out about it?
Yeah, Google Lake Erie Center. We're open to the public. You could contact us via our phone number, or our emails are on the website. You can contact any professor or the director, Dr. Tom Bridgman. And you're welcome to tour the Lake Erie Center. There's a few restrictions on research labs, just areas where, someone would have to accompany you, but we're doing a lot of great research, and I think we're here to protect the water for Ohioans, right? And so that's one of our main applied goals. So we're on Lake Erie, Bayshore Road, in Oregon, Ohio, and we're always happy to talk with people about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and the kinds of things that our research is helping us to understand. So
Okay.
I would highly encourage people to come visit the Lake Erie Center, contact the director, or you're welcome to contact me, and we can set up visits to Lake Erie Center, or it's open to the public, 8-9 a.m. to 4-5 p.m. pretty much every day. So
Cool.
stop on by and come see what we're doing. getting engaged in what the science is telling us, and getting engaged, just generally understanding how the environment around you is being affected by things like salt.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview and learned a little something, and will think twice before you buy a big bag of road salt to put on your driveway or your steps. There are alternatives that can do the job. So now we're going to hear from our advertisers and patrons. For a Green Future is brought to you by our patrons. These are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our wonderful Patreon page that shows different levels of memberships and has a bunch of cool photos on it. There they picked the level of membership that matched their monthly budget, and every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So we are extremely grateful to our patrons.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
Rebecca, we're back to you.
Okay, well, as I may have mentioned a time or two in the past, Farley Mowat was a big deal in my household growing up. He and the Little House on the Prairie books were something that my family used to read aloud to each other a lot. And the first thing when I decided to find out more about him was that I discovered that he looks very much like a guy who would be named Farley Mowat. Whatever you're picturing when you think of that, that's what he looks like. He also looks like one of those people who was, born to be a crusty old outdoorsy dude, and you could just see him in his 20s and think, yeah, he's going to be a crusty old outdoorsy dude. He is a Canadian writer and naturalist, and environmentalist. He has had his works translated into 52 languages, sold 70 million books. He lived from 1921 to 2014, and basically lived and died in, both was born and died in small towns in Ontario, although his family lived in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan for a while when he was a teenager, and a couple of his funnier books take place there. Some of his subjects were wolves, the Inuit peoples of the Canadian North, his experiences with rehabbing pet owls and a pet dog, and one of the things I learned from this book, don't ever keep your pet owls and your prairie dogs in the same enclosure. It's good for the owls, bad for the prairie dogs.
Okay, yeah.
So that was a bit of he was only a teenager to be fair, but that was a bit of a misstep. And also he talks about his war experience in one book, and his one book that's just about boating. It's about him owning a boat that had constant homicidal intentions towards him, and it was one of his funnier ones. But yeah, he became interested in environmentalism when he was studying biology at the University of Toledo, and then he got sent out as a field worker one summer as a student worker, and got sent to the north to study wolves and do biologist stuff, and then he got called away to fight in World War II and didn't ever come back to finish his degree. In one of his books, I can't remember which one, but there's sort of a scene where he has a transition point where, he had been relating to nature by killing stuff, put it in jars, and dissecting it, and he suddenly decided he didn't want to do that anymore. He didn't want to relate to nature that way, which might also have had something to do with him not finishing his degree. He was a commissioned lieutenant in World War II, participated in the invasion of Sicily. He writes at least one book that's all about his war experiences and details his account of having PTSD or battle fatigue, as they were calling it then. After some battle where his friend of his got shot in the head, I believe he kind of had a breakdown. Eventually reached the rank of captain. He was a captain, yeah. After his breakdown, they made him an intelligence officer in the Netherlands, and he kind of went behind the lines and negotiated food drops and saved thousands of Dutch from starvation, basically. So his claims that wolves subsist primarily on rabbits and rodents are controversial. That was the whole point of one of his major books, Never Cry Wolf, that got made into a movie.
A beautiful movie, by the way. I recommend everybody see it. Yeah, Never Cry Wolf.
And read the book. It's like that, only friggin' hilarious. But yeah, his whole, from his observations that he made while he was out there, he expected to see these ferocious pack of wolves like bringing down caribou left and right, because the government kind of sent him out there to discover that, well, we need to kill more wolves because they're wiping out all the caribou. And instead, he found out that according to him, they mostly eat rabbits and small rodents, and really only caribou that are old and sick or very young and sick. Like, they would do a thing where they would just kind of test the fawn, like run up on it. If it ran away good, then they wouldn't go after it. Like, it was weird to him. It was like they were playing tag you're it or something.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Now it's time for our ecological news segment. And we're going to start off with some really good news. This is an announcement from the Department of Energy. And they're finally doing something that makes sense as opposed to all their nuclear radioactive fantasies. They are spending $440 million. They announced this on November 2nd at energy.gov. They're spending $440 million putting rooftop solar and batteries in Puerto Rico.
No, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially since they had such terrible problems with the power going out last hurricane.
Yeah, and they still do.
Yeah.
The whole idea that you're going to rebuild the grid and make it like completely for-profit and private industries get in there and they're going to fix everything. Well, they haven't.
Yeah.
Electricity is still very unreliable in Puerto Rico. It could go out for hours at a time. And there were promises that they were going to make a quote-unquote resilient grid, but all that meant was they were going to use like heavier duty wires and slightly thicker electric poles. And then the next hurricane came along and just, wiped all those out. It was just like, really? No, that's not the way to get resiliency.
The hurricane was not afeared.
Yeah, it did not impress the hurricane. Yeah. So this is great. They believe it's going to help 30 to 40,000 single-family households in Puerto Rico.
Excellent.
It's going to create all kinds of jobs as people are, installing them and maintaining them. And so hopefully the next time Puerto Rico gets hit by some kind of disaster like that, people won't be without power for months. I recently watched a movie. They had a movie that was shown at the Imagination Station called How to Power a City. And they were, in that movie, they had a smaller program that was installing like 300 to 400 solar roofs. And this was actually before the pandemic, so it was a little bit outdated. But there were people making testimonials there. Puerto Rico was without electricity for months and months at a time, and people died. Lots of Puerto Ricans who needed supplemental oxygen, for example, or they needed medications that needed refrigeration, and there was no refrigeration.
Yeah.
A lot of them just died. So anyway, our least favorite nuclear supporter, Jennifer Granholm, was down there in Puerto Rico announcing the Puerto Rico Grid Recovery Modernization Team, a locally led intergovernmental task force dedicated to rebuilding the region's grid and resilience and so forth. And so that
No thanks
is,
to her.
yes, that's how we should be rolling. We
Yes.
should not be wasting another decade and tens of billions of dollars more on these stupid nuclear plants.
And guess what happens to them in hurricanes? Nothing good.
No, if they get cut off from power, things could get really nasty. It could lead to meltdowns. And it's kind of funny because Jennifer Granholm, whenever you see her talking about nukes, she's got this huge smile on her face. It's like that must be hurting her cheeks. You know? I can't imagine those muscles getting strained that much.
Right.
But she was here announcing this solar thing, and she was depressed. You know, she was like, "Oh, we got $400 million." And it's like, Jennifer, I know it's not radioactive, but you could try to get a little bit excited.
Cheer up.
Okay. All right, so that was some good news. So on to just kind of an interesting story. This one comes to us from Electrek, Electrec, on October 31st. They have just put, in Australia, they just put into service the world's first battery-powered heavy haul locomotive. And so this is a locomotive that actually is hauling iron ore, and it's battery-powered. Now, this isn't 100% wonderful. It's 50% wonderful, because what these trains normally do is they since they're carrying hundreds of millions of tons of ore, what they have to do is use a lot of energy to get going and to get moving.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they also waste a lot of energy stopping, because the brake power you need to stop 100 million tons, that's a lot of brake power. That's a lot of waste heat. And so
they can't do like I do when on the ice when I'm driving, where I just sort of give the gas pedal a tee tap and let it coast to the next light.
well,
let it naturally run.
You can let it coast,
right? But
if you're letting 100 million tons coast,
right.
It's going to coast for like a day and a half.
Yeah,
getting slower and slower, and getting it to stop right at the station. And
it's going to take a lot of calculation.
And unless you have a cape and a big S on your chest, if you need to stop it,
right,
you're not going to be able to stop it. But so what this battery-powered heavy haul locomotive does, it's paired with a gas one, and so the gas one does all the uphill and all the getting going. And then they switch over to the electric one, and it essentially does the braking. So it absorbs all that kinetic energy, just like regenerative brakes on an electric car, and that's how it charges itself. Yeah. So it doesn't. So this electric train has no charging station. They don't plug it in anywhere.
Wild.
They get all the energy from the kinetic energy that they put into the ore with a diesel engine, or when it's rolling downhill. So that's the only way it charges. So it's kind of taking the two locomotives and turning them into one hybrid locomotive, but it's powerful enough to haul hundreds of millions of tons, which is the cool part of the story. So it's just an interesting. It's like I said,
it is interesting.
It's not 100% wonderful. It's 50% wonderful. So,
right.
But it's better than what they had, which they used to have multiple diesel locomotives, and so now this is much better. This comes to us from Capital Press, and on November 3rd, it was announced that a court has overturned the EPA's ban on chlorpyrifos pesticides. So these are very dangerous pesticides that in 2021 the EPA banned them because they have high impact on human health. But the people, the big agribusiness that depend on pesticides like this, immediately appealed, and so now they just reversed the reversal. First the EPA was forced to put the ban in place because a bunch of environmental groups brought a suit saying, look, you got this pesticide that's like killing people, especially harms children. It affects their mental development. And then as soon as they did, so the court said, okay, EPA, you must do something. So the EPA said, okay, we're going to ban it. So that's what they did in 2021. And then immediately the beet growers, American Sugar Beet Growers Association, and all kinds of other agribusiness organizations appealed it. And so now the court has said you can't ban it. So this goes back to what we've been discussing the past couple of weeks, Chevron deference, where the experts at an agency who have a lifetime of training and all kinds of qualifications for making these decisions are being cut out of the decision process, and that's being handed to the courts, which are being run by guys who get politically appointed and women who get politically appointed who maybe haven't had any kind of scientific training at all. It takes a long time to go to law school, and so being a judge does not qualify you to look at an issue like chlorpyrifos. And
maybe you didn't have time while you were becoming a judge to also get a degree in biochemical engineering or something.
Exactly. So there's some bad news, and some more bad news. This is from an organization called Cipher News, and Cipher News is Bill Gates' own private media, news agency.
No, spiffy.
Yeah, he created it because I guess being able to get on any show anytime he wanted
was not enough for him.
Was not enough for him to talk as long as he want on any news story where he gets to promote nuclear power without getting answered or questioned or challenged at all. That wasn't enough for him. So he created a whole another news source that is just 100% whatever he wants. And what we have is exclusive U.S. pushes to ensure nuclear is, quote, is not forgotten, unquote, in COP Renewables pledge. And this was a story on October 30th. And it quotes anonymous inside sources in the Biden administration that said basically they're working to get nuclear recognized in the COP conference as renewable, like wind and like solar, which is insane. But unfortunately, we have to believe this because, as I said, this is Cipher, which is Bill Gates' private news source, and Bill Gates has direct access to the White House, to Biden and the officials and all sorts of government agencies.
Yay.
And so this is basically them announcing that's what they're going to do, which, we've spent many hours on this show talking about why that's such a bad idea. And so I don't think we need to go into all the details right now. But COP, Conference of Parties, 28th, it's coming up. It's going to be held in one of the largest oil-producing companies in the world. I have to say that this COP has the lowest expectations for any human gathering dealing with the biggest problem facing humanity in history.
Oh boy.
Nobody expects COP to be able to do anything because it's been taken over by the fossil fuel and the nuclear. And it's going to be just like COP27, which also did nothing, even though this year has been the year where the climate really just ran away. Just that positive feedback loop starting to go vertical. July was the hottest July in history. August, the hottest August. September, the hottest September. And September is when the curve really had get just almost vertical. October, we just found October was the hottest October ever. So we're at the end game. We are now just a few years away from complete disaster. And COP28, we have to say that the COP conferences are part of that disaster because they have been looking like people are doing something, looking like governments are taking action for decades, even as the amount of CO2 has continued to increase. So thank you all so much for listening. Boy, it's good to be back. And
Good to have you back.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Joey may be rejoining the show next week in some capacity. We've been talking because he was really good, you gotta admit.
Yeah.
This
Yes.
is Joe DeMare,
And Rebecca Wood.
and we are signing off.